All right, we are back again for another round of Wheatley writing sixth graders blow Mr. Krause's mind. Listen, I don't have enough hair on my head to deal with this every day. I'm gonna need y'all to dial it back a little bit. Can I get a brave volunteer to remind us of what our objective was that we were working on yesterday through practice round 1? Sarah, yeah, go ahead.
We will be able to draft dialogue and description in a narrative by imitating author's craft.
Excellent. Can I get everybody to take themselves off mute and give a little whoop, whoop to Sarah? Whoop, whoop, whoop. Thank you very much, Sarah. I appreciate you reading that. All right. So we were working on drafting dialogue and description in our narratives. And we did that by first looking at an author who really knows how to execute that in their writing. So what we're going to do is we'll start out with some shout outs because that's how we roll. And then we're going to move in to our next round. Sarah, great description yesterday. I'm telling you, I really smelled the smells that you were mentioning in your writing. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. All right. Monique, you are bringing the setting of the Great Depression to life for me. All right. I'm like, yo, how's this? I don't even, did I even need to teach her this stuff? Clearly, she knows all about the Great Depression. I love what y'all are doing with your stories, and it is amazing. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to split things up a little bit, and I'm going to pull one of my groups today, all right? And we're going to have a little powwow, Jim Jam session with Mr. Krause, while the rest of the folks go off and continue to work on their drafts as I'm powwowing with my little group. So James, the rest of the class, I can't believe I'm going to say this, I'm going to allow you to turn off your video, but you better be ready to bring me back some work in 10 minutes, okay? So the rest of the class is going to go. Monique, Sarah, if you'll hang back with me, is powwow with Mr. Krause time. All right. All right. Well, I feel like the luckiest guy in the world. I've got the best students with me right now. Don't tell anybody else I said that. They probably heard me. I'm just messing with the rest of the class. All right. So what we're going to do today is we're going to hone in a little bit on a skill that I want you guys to really focus in on as we work together, and then when you go off and work on your drafts. I already told you, you killed it with description. The way you're bringing your setting to life, all of those story elements are great. One thing I really want us to focus on is dialogue, though. Now, before we start diving in to look at another author's work, I want to ask you a couple of questions. Somebody, please tell me what this fancy word dialogue is. Monique.
Dialogue is when characters talk in a story.
Yeah, it's when characters talk. Now let me ask you this. Why do we need to put some characters talking up in our story? What is the purpose of dialogue? Monique?
It makes the story more interesting, I think. And I guess you can like really visualize or kind of put yourself in the situation when you can hear what the characters have to say.
Okay, so it makes it more interesting. You can hear what the characters have to say. Does anybody else want to add on to that? Any other thoughts about?
I agree with Monique.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, like we're writing stories. We have these characters and we really want to bring them to life, and dialogue is one way to do that. Now we're going to look at 2 examples of authors who are writing narratives. One example is Bud Not Buddy, and we know how Christopher Paul Curtis brings it every time, right? And then another example is by a young writer who I've actually had in my classroom, all right, who wrote a very similar narrative to what you guys are writing. I'm going to look at these 2 narrative examples, and I want us to think as we read. Everybody get your thinking fingers and put them right onto your brains and get your brains a little massage to get you ready. Yep. All right. Y'all are ready to think. So your question as you are going throughout that you're going to think about is, do the authors use dialogue or not? And how does it make the stories feel if they do or do not? Okay. We're going to start out with my young writer. I'm not going to mention any names because that's not how I roll. And we're going to take a look at his example of his Great Depression story that he wrote last year. All right. So I'm going to read it in the best voice I can. One day I met a new friend. This is what the student sounded like last year. His name was Johnny. and he was short and kind of funny looking. I told him my name was Jack. He told me a joke, which made me laugh out loud like a laughing hyena. Right away, we were best buds, and we decided we'd walk through the thick forest to try and find some nice people to give us some food. All right, that's one example. Full disclosure, most of you sound that way, okay? All right, so that's one example. The second example is from Christopher Paul Curtis. Remember, we're thinking about dialogue. All right, I'm gonna start with I said, ow. I said, ow. The big square man who'd grabbed my neck looked at the man with the strap and said, boy had to go use the crapper. I told him not to waste time. Monique, I know we use the word crapper. Okay, sorry, bring it back down a little bit. Okay, all right. Boy had to go use the crapper. Told him not to waste time. But like you said, these kids today don't listen to nobody. The strap man looked at the size of the man who called me Clarence and walked back to the end of the line. All right. I gave you a thinking job and I told you I was coming back to it. Do the authors, my young friend who was in my class last year, Christopher Paul Curtis, use dialogue or not, and how does it make the stories feel? I'm gonna give you as much time as you need to think, not really. And I want you to answer that question. Who can tell me? Did the young man in the beginning use dialogue or not? See Sarah squinting. That's her squinting look. I don't know if she's sure about that. Monique's giving me the Nah, there wasn't really any dialogue in there. Did the author mention anybody talking or anything along those lines? It's kind of hard to think back, right? Would it be helpful if I showed you the slide again? Okay, all right, I'm gonna go back to it. That's how we roll. All right, so let's take a look again. Does the author mention anyone talking or use dialogue? What do you think?
Yeah, it said, I told him my name was Jack and he told me a joke. So that means that they were talking.
They were talking, but is it using dialogue? Does it actually have them talking? No, it doesn't, right? We don't actually see the talking. We know they talked because the author told us they talked, but we don't see them talk. What do you think that makes a story feel like when you don't actually see the characters talk? You just know that they did. Sarah?
Boring.
Okay, boring. Yeah, all right, I'll agree with that. Anybody want to add on to that? All right. I agree, it's boring. And I think it doesn't make our characters really feel alive. It doesn't feel like it's really happening. Now, what about this one? Does the author use dialogue or not? Yeah, I'm seeing some heads nodding right away. Okay, so there is some dialogue in here. Now, how does it make this story feel? I have to call on somebody. Oh, Monique, what do you think?
I think to me, it feels like more interesting. It's almost like you could watch it like you're watching a movie instead of like when you're reading it, it feels like you're watching a movie, like you can create a picture in your head.
Okay, you can create a picture in your head. Are there any other words that we can use to describe that, of being able to create a picture in your head, or like you're watching a movie? How does the dialogue make you feel? What does it make you think? Would you say that it makes the story more realistic? Okay, I see some head nods. Does it make you feel like the characters are more kind of alive? Yeah, I'd agree with that too. Even though they're on the page, they actually feel like they're real, right? And that talking really makes that happen, okay? So we are going to try and do that in our own writing. But what I really want to make sure that we know how to do is include the key things that make strong dialogue in our story, all right? So I've got 3 points here of what makes really strong dialogue. Sarah, would you read to us in your best Donald Trump impersonation the first bullet point of what makes strong dialogue?
I will not. I will in my best Sarah voice. It feels realistic, tells the story through characters' words, and is used regularly but not overdone.
Great. You did not do the voice, but you definitely continued on with all 3 bullet points. And that's something Mr. Trump would have done no matter what he was asked. So I appreciate that. And that's exactly what we need to do. Good dialogue feels real, like people are talking. It doesn't tell the story, it tells the story through the character's words. And it's used regularly, but Lord of mercy, it is not overdone. We don't want 18 pages of people talking, right? So I want you guys to give it a try with just 1 line of dialogue from your story, all right? So I'm going to give you 2 minutes by yourself to chat to me privately some examples of using strong dialogue in a story. 1 line of dialogue that you are going to chat to me. Monique, what are you going to do in 2 minutes?
We're going to add a line of we're going to chat you privately, a line of dialogue from our story that we added.
Great. All right. Okay. All right. I just got a lot of good examples of dialogue sent to me that felt realistic, that told the story through the character's words, and was used regularly. I saw some really good examples. In fact, I'm going to share one right now. Sarah, I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to share the first 2 lines of your story with us, okay? All right, here it goes. Ew, who farted? I yelled. One of the boys in the group had let out a real stinker. Well, don't look at me, bub, said Johnny. All right, Sarah, that was an extremely realistic piece of dialogue, and it included all the components of what we're looking for. Can everybody give Sarah a little bit of shine? And this goes out to yourself as well for doing such fantastic work. So it's time for practice round 2. Now, here's what you are going to do today. We're going to remember our objective. We're going to be able to draft dialogue and description in a narrative by imitating the author's craft. Your job in the next 8 minutes, 7.5 minutes, is when I say taco, you are going to begin continuing your work on your drafts, mastering our objective, and really focusing in on that dialogue for today. All right? So get yourselves ready, get it loosened up, and taco.